I was building a React Native music app this weekend and I learned primarily two things. One is that Soundcloud API is really weird. You have to submit a Google form to get an API key and then it takes up to a month to get it. We're probably going to build this app in two stages, where the first one is going to be as far as we can get without SoundCloud, and then we're going to add the actual music playing stuff. The other thing I learned is that constantly starting new React Native projects is really hard, because whenever you run React Native init, it kinda, well, the ecosystem moves so fast that things keep breaking just because stuff gets out of date. The reason I want to use the SoundCloud API is because it's the only API that I could find that lets you both search for music and then play that music. Okay, let's figure out how to do this without a SoundCloud API key.
3 hours later.
I was able to hack around the issue with SoundCloud API keys, but there's a build issue that prevented me from actually building the music player part. The React component for playing music and interacting with the iOS music stuff kinda doesn't really work. So we're still gonna build this app in two parts. In this first part, you're going to learn how to use the Shoutem grid view, how to use Redux a little bit, and how to hack the Flickr and SoundCloud API to give you what you want. The app we're building looks like this. It loads as a list of music genres that you can click on, and then we pick up songs from SoundCloud and eventually play one of the songs, and then the next song and the next song and so on. Right now the actual playing component doesn't work yet, so and if you go to the URL we show in the app, you'll see that it's a direct streaming link from SoundCloud. If you want to see how I build the app from scratch, you can go to my personal YouTube channel and look at the live streams. If you want to see an overview and actually learn something, then you should keep watching this video and read the article. First, we're going to look at the grid view and Flickr stuff. The core of our grid is the genre art component, which uses local state to talk to Flickr and render an image. The reason it uses local state instead of Redux is because that is so much simpler. We have state, which starts with an undefined URL. In component did mount, we call our Flickr helper and then set update state with the new URL. And in the render method, we render either an image or an empty box. The Flickr helper is a hacked together fetch call. It uses the Flickr API to make a photo search with the JSON format. We have an API key, which is my API key, so you should get your own, or, well, I guess you can use this one. Just when we get the result, we parse it as JSON, create a new promise, and resolve it with a static Flickr image, or a static URL for a Flickr image. There's special rules for how to do that, and you can see the link in the article. We render a bunch of those genre art components in a big genres component. This one is a Shoutem UI grid view, which means that, well, the way Shoutem UI grid views work is that it's essentially a list view that then has grids as individual rows. The reason it's done that way is so that you can have individual rows with different numbers of columns. So the way that works is that in the render method, we return a list view that takes a render row method that tells it what to do with each row, and some data, which is, in our case, the genre data in groups of two. The render row itself returns a grid row with two columns, and each of the cells in the columns is a genre button. Now, genre button is a Redux connected component, so I guess in Redux nomenclature it's called a container, although it takes the currently playing genre out of state, and in the component itself, it checks if the current genre we're rendering is currently playing. Then we render the playing component, which doesn't work yet. Or if this is just any old genre, like all of these ones here, then we render the genre art thingy. We also render a subtitle, and we make the entire thing touchable so that when you click on it, stuff changes. Oh, and we use the onPress callback to dispatch a play genre action. More on that later. To tie all of this together, we also need an app component. The app component itself renders a provider which takes the Redux store and puts it into React context, and it renders an app UI. The app UI is a Redux connected component that takes genres, which is just an array of genre names in this case, renders a navigation bar, a view, a heading, and then the genres component, which is the grid view with all this stuff. Now it's time for the SoundCloud and Redux stuff. We start with a Redux reducer. That's the thing that tells our state how to change depending on the actions we trigger. So for the playing genre action, we set currently playing to the name of the current genre. And for the found songs action, we update our state with the list of songs. Now we're doing something a little bit unkosher here because we are changing a deep state of the songs object. The reason it's an object, not a list, is because we want to be able to save song lists for multiple genres at the same time so that we don't have to keep refetching them. And in theory, you should create a sub-reducer or another reducer for this kind of thing, but I think for a simple app like this is okay. Our reducer's initial state is just a list of all the genres we want to list in our app, a null currently playing, and an empty object for all the songs that we're going to add later. Our reducer only cared about 2 actions, but we actually have 3 actions. The first is playing genre, which tells us that something is playing right now. And then we have the found songs action, which tells us that we have found songs, and then the reducer saves them to the store. The most important action is play genre. This is the one that we call when a user taps on one of these things over here. It first dispatches the playing genre action, which changes what's being displayed in place of the image. Then it performs a search on SoundCloud to find the songs for that genre, and in the end dispatches the found songs action with what it's found. The thing about SoundCloud is that they're very slow to issue API keys. I signed up a couple days ago to get an API key from them, which meant submitting a Google form. It's not automated at all. And I might hear back from them in like a month or something. What I did is I went to their website and I looked at the network tab on Google DevTools and I checked what their client ID is. So we're just using SoundCloud's own client ID, and I hope that's okay. Another issue is that SoundCloud's official SDK doesn't work with React Native because it expects to run in a browser. We build a wrapper where we have a search function that triggers a fetch to the SoundCloud API, parses the JSON, and returns the result. The results look something like this. Basically, you have a list of songs with a bunch of properties that aren't that important right now. And in the end, we have a working music app. It doesn't actually play any music, but it renders some images, and when you click on one of them, it fetches the songs and almost starts playing it. Part 2 of the React Native Music app, we're going to make the actual music playing work. And we're going to improve the UI so it shows SoundCloud waveforms and maybe a SoundCloud logo somewhere, things like that. And it's going to be really great. So you should subscribe and join me next time when we do all of those things.